hello, welcome to 251, two pianists, 5 minutes, one subject. My name's Nick Tomalin.
And I'm Simon Whiteside. Today we're going to be talking about block chords and asking the question, are block chords for blockheads? First of all, we need to define what we mean by block chords. Generally speaking, it's a pianist thing because we're able to do it. I suppose you could say guitarists can play chord melodies. That's fairly similar. But first of all, here is a scale played in block chords. And those of you with very good ears will notice that fundamentally that's only two chords, C minor 6 and a diminished chord, which could be considered to be G7 flat 9. And that shape can be repeated up and down, and it gives a very strong sense of harmony, and also it makes it loud. Pianists were always unamplified in the early days, and it's a way of beefing up your sound. So Nick, do you have any comments on that?
I mean, just to say that, what you're doing there is what is also sometimes called a locked hands style. I think block chords can be more general, just any kind of chords moving, bigger chords moving. But the locked hands or sometimes shearing style is a very specific technique, isn't it?
Yeah, well, in fact, I was playing actually one hand, but in order for it to be properly block chords, I should have had the melody doubled at the octave.
Yeah.
And there are other methods whereby instead of doubling at the octave, you drop 2, which is an interesting concept where you have 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. You take the 2, put it down an octave, and you get that more open sound. But I think you've got a little bit on the origins of this and why we talk about it as a sort of an arranger's piano sort of technique in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it gets called the shearing style, and although George Shearing did a lot to popularise this, he wasn't the first player to do it, and players like Milt Buckner also used this style before George Shearing. In fact, that's possibly where he got the idea from. But there was a piano player who was new to me before I started looking at this called Phil Moore, who I think you said it's quite a appropriate name in a way when we talk about block chords. Phil Moore. He was probably the first to use it. And what's interesting for me is he was actually an arranger as well. And I always think of this in terms of an arranging technique because very often arrangers use this as a way of voicing the 5 saxophones in a big band. It's a very common way of voicing it. So it'd be a natural kind of extension to apply this to the piano, really. Yeah,
I mean, as arrangers in those days didn't have computers, obviously you're working it out at the piano and you're looking at the 5 voices available to you. Or also, because I played it first with just one hand, we had that sound of 4, say, trumpets, for example. And the other thing, I suppose, is that for arranging, you want to get some motion into the harmony, which is not necessarily in the chord. So you might just have something that's just sitting on C minor, but gives you a bit of sort of motion, doesn't it?
It's also easier to play, isn't it? If it's saxophone section of playing like an improvised line or a line, if it's easier for them to play if they're all moving. That's the way I always understood it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, have you got any? Would you like to play any examples of?
Well, I'll play a little bit. So, putting it all together, this is kind of the thing that you end up with.
Yeah, and the other way that sometimes block chords are used. Well, I mean, the thing about the George Shearing thing, I suppose, is that you have the vibraphone and the guitar, and they played the outer octaves, didn't they, to sort of strengthen the tune. But we shouldn't forget people like Phineas Newborn, should we?
No.
Who played a lot of block chords, and actually Red Garland with his sort of spread voicings.
There's another way of approaching it, yeah.
So that concludes our block chords for blockheads. You decide. I'm Simon Whiteside.
My name's Nick Tomlin.